Nick, are you ready to start?
I'm ready to start.
All right, excellent. Then let's get it rolling. This is Purpose Lab Podcast, take 1 on Lean Accounting. Bienvenidos, soy Javier Perales. Recuerden que en Purpose Lab y en esta serie de podcasts hablamos de estrategia, de buenas prácticas y de demás fuentes de inspiración para que los líderes puedan dar el siguiente paso en su inspiración. En ocasiones lo hacemos en español, en ocasiones lo hacemos en inglés. Hoy tenemos un huésped especial con quien estaremos hablando en inglés. Es Nick Katkto, especialista en Lean Accounting. En Purpose Lab hacemos estrategia, reinventamos y retamos modelos de negocio, llevándolos de la mano en la gestión, el plan y los indicadores. Todo lo hacemos automático, conectado y el soporte en línea por medio de nuestra plataforma Strategify. All right, Nick. Thank you. Thank you for being here and welcome to this podcast episode.
Thanks, Javier. Glad to be here and glad to be part of Purpose Lab's podcast series.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You are actually one of the first podcasts that we record. So also thank you for your confidence, and we are certain that what you are going to be sharing with the audience is going to be very relevant.
Yeah.
So let us all start by saying, who are you? Tell me who you are, Nick.
Yeah. All right. Well, my name's Nick Katkto. I live in Lexington, Kentucky in the United States. I have been practicing lean accounting for over 25 years, both as a chief financial officer and as a coach, consultant, and trainer for BMA, which is which we are the lean accounting leaders.
All right, that's very good. Let's dive a little deeper. Tell us who you are.
I'm very passionate about lean accounting. I've written the book, The Lean CFO. I believe that lean accounting is an essential component of a lean transformation. It's very strategic in nature, even though it doesn't sound very strategic. You hear lean accounting, you think, oh, we're talking about the accounting department, but you're really talking about the business as a whole and how the accounting function and the information can be aligned with the lean strategy.
All right. One last time, tell us who you are, Nick.
I'm out.
That's all right. So that proceeds, as you folks know, that's basically for us to get to know our presenters a little bit better, our guests. Again, thank you for being here. So you told us that this is what you do for a living, Nick. You understand you are retired and you focus mostly on the consulting portion of the business right now?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. So exactly what you do for a living right now is you focus more on the consulting side of implementing lean accounting. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, it's consulting, it's training, it's coaching. Actually, here in 2020, the delivery methods have changed because of COVID-19. So yeah, the traditional way of going on site and doing training and doing consulting has been basically transformed this year into more online efforts, which has been working out well, but hopefully the on-site comes back. But that's really what I concentrate on. I'm also working on writing a new lean accounting book and also developing more online workshops as opposed to just the standard training with PowerPoint slides, trying to create some more interactive workshops so people can learn a little better online.
All right, excellent. So what would you say makes you an expert on this topic, Nick? You are part of BMA, the leading implementers in lean accounting. So how did you come to be there, or what makes you an authority in terms of lean accounting, which we're honored to have on our show, by the way?
Well, as I said earlier, I've been practicing lean accounting for over 25 years. And I like to think of myself in that way, that I've been practicing it for a long time. And because it's like anything else that you learn, and you learn and you practice and you get better at it. I've been lucky enough to be able to do this for as long as I've been doing it. So, I mean, authority, I don't like to think of myself as an authority. I just like to think of myself as somebody who's been practicing a lot, has a lot of experience, and can share a lot of what I have experienced with others to help them learn. You know, I started out as a chief financial officer in the 1990s for a manufacturing company. And we embarked on a lean transformation. We hired people with lean experience. And I quickly learned that the information that was needed inside the business was not what the accounting function was producing. So we weren't meeting our internal users' value propositions. And so, you know, over a period of time, I challenged everything that we were doing in accounting and finance, listened to my customers, what they needed, and we made the changes. Now, at the time, I didn't know I was doing lean accounting. It just seemed something natural for the business. And then in the late 1990s, I read one of Brian Maskell's books, and everything connected, and I connected with Brian. And then I learned that, you know, here's some people writing about lean accounting. There's more people out there doing it. And eventually, after a few years, Brian invited me to work with him at BMA, which I did, starting in the early 2000s. And then in 2018, Brian retired, and he let me have the business.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And in terms of achievements or publications, so for example, you wrote the Lean CFO. We have that one here. The Architect of the Lean Management System by Katkto. And you said that you are working on your second book. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what can people find in this first book, and then on your second book, what would they be able to find it?
Yeah, well, the first book is pretty much an approach, our BMA approach to implementing lean management accounting. And I wrote it strictly from the CFO viewpoint, so that sort of the CFO can understand, and really not just CFOs, but you know, any leader in any financial leader in an organization can understand, you know, here are the tools and here's what's supposed to happen, but you know, how do you have to do your thinking? How can you provide the leadership to make a lean management accounting system work? So that's the approach in that book. The new book is probably going to be titled Practicing Lean Accounting, and it's going to be based around 8 essential practices that need to be put in place to make lean accounting work. You know, accounting people, I mean, and I'm one, we are doers. We like to do things. You know, we close the books, we pay the bills, we do all those things. And so the idea behind the book is, I would get asked a lot, well, how do you do lean accounting? Well, it's not something that you do. And like I said earlier, it's something that you practice. So, and it's not something that ends. And so it's about, how do you establish these practices? How do you build and connect all these practices together? And the idea behind the book is that it's more of a reference guide that you can always go back to and say, okay, well, here, you know, here's what I'm doing in terms of lean accounting, or here's what I'm practicing. What does the book say I, you know, should be doing early in the journey, later in the journey, and so on?
Okay, well, that's definitely very interesting. I'm looking forward to reading your second book also, and learning a little bit more about what you do in terms of lean accounting. So we've always found that the best way to let people know about the specific topic is by telling them a story. So if it's possible that you share with us probably one or a couple of stories where you can say, well, this is what we were doing, or this is what was happening, this is where lean accounting came into play, how things change, how it aligns to that company strategy, so that people can grasp the minds a little bit better around the concept.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one of my stories that really opened my eyes. So as I said, I was working as a CFO. We had people with lean experience, and we were in our budgeting cycle, and the lean people had come on board a few months earlier. And so it was time to prepare the budgets, and within setting the budgets, finance and accounting always set up the labor and overhead rates for the next year. In the past, I always worked a lot with the manufacturing leaders to work out those numbers. And so I went to the manufacturing leaders, and by the way, the story is in the book, but the names are changed. I went to the manufacturing leaders. I said, well, it's time to set the labor and overhead rates. And they said, I'm paraphrasing, they said, well, do whatever you want. We don't care, because we don't use those numbers. And so I'm like, what? Okay.
and by the way, sadly enough, that's reality in many industries nowadays.
Yeah. And so now, they explained to me what they needed. And, it was more in terms of performance measurements and real-time cost information, not numbers based on rates or variances and things like that. And so I didn't understand. So I went in and started developing that information that they wanted, but I still had, I meant the whole accounting function still had to set up these rates. And so I just, okay, we have to set up these rates. And I started thinking, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? And then I realized that it wasn't, the reason we were setting these rates wasn't for operations. It was just for finance to value inventory. And that made me start thinking very differently about things. And that sort of really, it woke me up about, what's the role of management accounting in a lean organization?
Okay. And this definitely takes you to new places, right? So our experience with lean accounting, this first encounter with people, and by the way, I know that there are hours and hours, probably dozens or even more than that, of training hours that people can take in concepts of lean accounting. But the first time they hear about lean accounting, they immediately start thinking about financial statements, right? And there's so much more to lean accounting than that. We go very little into actually changing, or even if we do that at all, financial statements for a company. Lean accounting is more about decision making, as you're saying.
Yes, and it's more about the information that needs to be used inside a lean organization. And here's the way to think about it. And let's say it doesn't matter if you're a manufacturing company or a service company. If you're a manufacturing company, would you build a product that you think your customers want and ship it to them and say, here's your product? You wouldn't ever think of doing that, just, because you need to know what your customers want and deliver what they want. And so that is really what lean accounting is about. It is about the relevant and reliable information to the internal users in the business. And so you have to, if you understand lean is all about creating value. So the role of accounting and finance is to listen to your internal customers and give them the information they want when they need it. Don't make any assumptions, and don't assume that the information you have been delivering them for years and years is what they need today, because it changes. And that's really what lean accounting is about.
I think it's clear as water. Now, part of what we talk about, and we'll get deeper into that, but I think this is a process, right? So continuous improvement, strategic planning, making sure that we get where we need to be is a whole process. Lean accounting can be part of the supporting system for all that. Am I getting that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Well, accounting, the accounting function is it's a support. It supports the business. A company has to have an accounting function. How do you do it? How you do it, I mean, you could have your own people do it, employees. You can outsource accounting if you want, but accounting has to occur. And so the transactions have to occur, the information has to be produced. And so it's really, looking at accounting and finance and understanding how does what we think of accounting change, meaning we're going to get, like you said, we're going to get away from just thinking about financial statements. We're going to think about accounting and finance from a strategic standpoint. How can it support a lean business strategy? Mm-hmm. And it's, I talked a lot about the relevant and reliable information, but you also have to think of some of the work that accounting normally does and how that can impact the business. For example, accounting pays suppliers. Okay. Now, suppliers are very essential for operations to run. So accounting has to do a good job in terms of paying its suppliers on time, resolving any kind of discrepancies with the suppliers in a timely fashion to maintain the relationship so that the supplier doesn't get upset, and which could impact operations.
Okay. So it is definitely a vital part of different pieces and portions of the business. Now, even with that, Nick, I know that the questions will arise. So our audience will continue to think about financial statements, and there are two main topics that I can think of that every customer that we've ever touched on lean accounting always asks us about. One of them has to do with how do you use lean accounting in terms of cost setting or cost calculation or evaluation? And the second one is, how is this going to change the way we pay our taxes? And I know we have little time today. This is more of a podcast and not the whole training, but could you briefly touch on these two topics, Nick? I think they're very interesting for our audience.
Okay, so I'm going to back up. I'm going to answer those two questions, but I'm going to add a third, if you don't mind.
Great.
Because you said a few times, external financial statements, and all of the external reporting, which includes things like paying taxes. All right, lean accounting does not change those outcomes. Okay, I mean, lean accounting does not say you have to change the way your financial statements look. You still have to comply with all reporting regulations. However, what lean accounting does is it requires you to look at the process. For example, producing financial statements typically occurs during what we in accounting and finance call month-end close. So the question is, eliminate the waste and close the books faster. We're not saying change the results, but close the books faster. Paying taxes. Now, there's a due date. The taxes are due. What's the process that accounting and finance has to go through to produce the information to deliver it to the tax preparer to pay the taxes. Is there waste? Is there rework? Is there a lot of waiting time for information? So that's how lean accounting works when it comes to those processes. So it doesn't change how much you pay in taxes. It might change the process of how you prepare the information and gather the information, and actually make it simpler and easier to do by eliminating waste. Now, when it comes to costs, lean accounting and finance people, we like to look at costs, and we like to analyze costs 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways. The fact of the matter is that lean is a time-based strategy. So costs are an outcome. And so, and it's important for finance to understand that we have to develop strong relationships between operating practices that and how they drive costs. You cannot do that by simply putting numbers in a spreadsheet and analyzing the numbers and drawing a conclusion. It's really about understanding operations. And so part of lean accounting is for accounting and operations to become teammates and work together to understand these relationships. I always say when I'm doing training, companies always want to improve financial results. And I always say, if you want to change the financials, you have to change the physical. Financial numbers, you can't sit there and say, you know, costs have to go down 5%. You could say it, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. There has to be physical operational changes to drive the costs. And that is the shift in thinking in lean accounting, especially from finance people. They have to get out of this cost mentality and think about what's driving the costs. But to do that, you need to understand lean a little bit and what's going on.
So for you folks that are listening to this episode, if you came in expecting to hear, hey, lean accounting, this is going to be our savior, how we're going to be finally changing our books, that's not going to be the case. What lean accounting is going to tell you is how you make your processes of decision making, probably of closing your books as you're saying, how to make them more efficient, right? And gathering the right data, you talked about relevant and reliable.
Yeah. And
for decision making.
Yeah, and relevant information is, first of all, it's timely. And in lean operations, there's daily cycles of information that's needed. There's weekly cycles in addition to monthly. Okay, and we, again, in accounting, we usually think on the monthly cycle. So what information is needed daily to understand how well we're performing on a daily basis or on a weekly basis? So that's one thing. The other piece is that relevant is that it helps predict outcomes better, or if we're looking backwards, we can analyze better. Okay? I mean, because that's what any analysis is. An analysis is based on some assumptions, and you're trying to say, this is what, you know, if these assumptions are true, this is what the financial outcome will be. And so we're trying to get better at that. Now, reliable information really means that it represents reality. That this is the most reliable up-to-date information we have at the time we are looking at this decision. So we have to eliminate estimates and rates and look at the real numbers. How much are we spending on labor currently? We don't have to look at a labor rate to understand that. We need to say, here is what our salary expense is. then it's not so much, for example, the expense, it's why is it what it is? Well, are we running a lot of overtime? Well, why are we running overtime? What's the operational reason? And it's diving into that level of understanding to drive costs.
So it's thinking about the why of the information, why is it there, and then how to use this information for decision making.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Excellent.
decisions are in any business. Decisions are constantly being made throughout the business, in operations and sales and marketing and supply chain by executives. And so again, relevant and reliable at the moment that the decision has to be made. And it's a collaborative team-based approach. It's not, like I said, it's not just accounting doing it in isolation, because quite frankly, accounting and finance, we don't have all the information. And that's one thing I learned as a CFO, is how much we in accounting had to rely on operations. And if I'm performing an analysis for the executive team, I need information from operations to understand, well, how are conditions today and what are they going to look like in 6 months to do a good analysis? I can't do that by myself. Likewise, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the finance and accounting teams are part of a larger value stream they're just one piece of the whole organization, right? So as such, they need to do the job, and that job is not only presenting financial statements, but actually helping the organization get better, and how to measure that improvement also comes from being part of the financial.
And that's another interesting part about Lean as a business strategy. It's all based, you hear a lot about, Kanban and pull systems and single piece flow and all those words and all those terms and tools. But Lean is based, Lean is based on numbers. And it's about moving numbers. Here's the interesting thing is the numbers are different. Okay, we're looking at improving productivity, improving quality, improving flow month. And so this is where accounting can leverage its analytical skills. We know how to analyze numbers. We know if numbers are moving in the right direction. We know how to dive in and look for the reasons. And so at one level, we're not asking an accounting to do anything different in terms of skills. It's about learning how to use the new numbers.
And then sharing how these numbers came to be with the right people, right? So that they can also understand what do they mean in their own line of work.
Yes. Yeah. What I've learned as a CFO and what I've seen from other financial leaders in Lean organizations that really that understand Lean accounting is the accounting function is sort of like internal coaches, internal consultants. There's a lot of collaboration and working with the different functions, making sure that they're all using the right information and doing some interpretation. If you're talking to an operational person, the operational person may not have a whole lot of financial experience, but in accounting, I can interpret things in a way that an operational person can understand it, not in a way that a financial person can understand it. So it's really about there's a lot of communication involved in Lean accounting.
Definitely, and that will take us actually, I believe, to strategic alignment with Lean accounting. But we'll get there in a minute. Before going there, Nick, I would like to ask you, and you already said that you were writing a second book about this. So, but if you had to summarize this as simple as possible, I don't know, if there's a three-step process, for example, for a company or a team that wants to say, hey, we are going to implement Lean accounting, how would you summarize this in as simple a structure as possible?
All right, I would look at the management accounting piece, and then I would look at the accounting function. Looking at the management accounting piece, you know, the thing I would do, especially if you're in a lean organization, if I came in either as, you know, my role, or if I was hired as a CFO and it was a lean organization, I'd get the leaders of the organization or even lean people, and they would call up, say, hey, oh, you know, we want to talk to you about lean accounting. We don't think accounting and finance is giving us the information we need, and we're having a hard time explaining what we need to them. I mean, that's really what it is. It's the customers. So that's what I would do for management accounting. And then for the accounting function, I would start teaching and training the accounting staff about waste and how waste appears in accounting processes, because it's a lot different than sort of traditional manufacturing, in the fact that a lot of the work that accounting does as part of our normal activities can have waste in it. And so again, we develop this awareness of waste, and you know what? If you can stop it, stop it. Just stop doing things that are wasteful. I mean, those are just two simple, easy ways to get started.
That's interesting. I'd like to share a story of my own, if I may. A few years ago, we worked with a company. I'm not even going to say the type of company that it was.
Sure.
But there was a department in here that had about 15 people working on performing reports. All day, all week, all month, that's what they did. So after a little bit of analyzing, we couldn't come to understand what half of these reports were even doing or who was using that. So as you said, what we did is just stop doing whatever you're doing and let's see what the customer asked for.
Yeah.
Right. So after a week or two, out of 150 reports, something like that, people asked for less than 10% of that.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a lot of work happening in terms of building information, putting together information, trying to understand or get the results that you want to use, but they were not even really being used for that purpose. So I totally understand what you're saying there.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And again, it's, you know, looking at that from a lean viewpoint, accounting, who knows why who knows why that information showed up in the reports. It could have been something that somebody asked for one time and accounting just kept producing it. It could be accounting, you know, we like to break things down, and, you know, we have numbers and details and charts and graphs. And so we think, you know, oh, we think this is what the customer needs. So we just produce it without asking. And, you know, again, it's just listen to the customers. I experienced the same thing with you that you did when in my first job, the job where I I wasn't originally the CFO, I was the controller. And I was hired because the CFO was an older man who was getting ready to retire. And you know, one of the complaints was it took a long time to close the books. And so he produced the accounting department produced a binder of materials that, you know, the leaders of the company, that, like you said, they just didn't read most of it. And so it was just easy to stop producing, and all of a sudden the books are closed faster.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that hard to streamline that process a little bit, I guess. I mean, yeah. there was definitely much more to it afterwards, but there are so many things that we do to start with that are just all plain waste.
Yeah. And it's, you know, one thing I say in the book, in terms of waste in accounting, I call it's like looking at an iceberg. If you were on a ship and you saw an iceberg, that iceberg may appear to be big, but that's only 10% of the iceberg. 90% of the iceberg is underneath the water. And so accounting waste is like the iceberg underneath the water. You have to look at the way the work gets done. Sometimes you have to look at specific activities, or in this example we've been talking about, you know, look at each page in the report. You know, why is this information being produced? Is anybody using it? And so this takes time, but the benefits outweigh the effort, because, you know, for example, those reports, every report you were able to eliminate creates more time for accounting and finance.
Right. So you do it once and you are actually creating time for your team.
Yeah. And time is the currency of Lean.
It's the one resource that if you lose, you won't be getting back for sure.
Right. That's right.
Right. So at this point, Nick, I know that our audience can already start seeing how is it relevant to talk about Lean accounting when they're focusing on strategy. But you know that here at Purpose Lab, we focus on business strategy, and the leaders that are actually in charge of putting together and following up on this strategy. So why would you say that for a leader with this characteristics or with this focus, is it relevant for them to put today's topic as Lean accounting into practice?
Well, if you have a Lean strategy, the first question I would ask anyone is how you're measuring it.
Okay.
How do you?
So how are you going to know if you're successful with what you're planning?
And here's another piece. So how are you going to measure it? But also, what do you expect out of your Lean strategy? You can do projections, you know, but are the financial projections based on what I call the economics of Lean, or are they based on sort of conventional practices, financial projection practices that you have been using in the past? Because if you're using conventional financial practices to try to do a financial projection on Lean, like, okay, let's say 3-5 years out, it's probably not going to be a good projection, because these projections are based on non-Lean assumptions. And that's where companies fall into traps trying to understand the impact of Lean. Let me give you a simple example. Where I went into this one company and I was talking to a Lean accounting team, which was made up of finance and operational people. And they told me, this was like during a break, they said, oh, the senior leaders of the company, they think that Lean is going to reduce our costs, and that's what they expect to see. And so, you know, that is the best example from a strategic standpoint, where leaders think our strategy is going to reduce costs, and Lean is not a cost reduction strategy. Lean is about creating value. Is there a possibility that costs will go down over time? Yes, but reducing costs is difficult to do. And we recognize that in a Lean organization.
Okay. What would you tell to non-Lean organizations, Nick? So we know that Lean accounting and the concept of analyzing your accounting process, your data for decision making, of course, works best when you already have a culture of continuous improvement. Many of our customers are only starting this journey. They're not even thinking about continuous improvement at this point. They're only thinking about their plans, what they are planning to do for next year, for the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. And we were talking about measuring success and lean accounting and how this relates to all those. I believe there is also a lot of interconnectivity there with lean accounting, even if you're in a currently non-lean organization, right?
Yeah, I think the connectivity is, the way accounting gets its work done, and how can it get done better? There's lots of companies out there these days that still have complex month-end close processes. And, the leaders of the company are not satisfied because it takes too long to get the numbers. Well, you can apply lean accounting to your month-end process to reduce the amount of time and satisfy your customers. You'd be surprised how many companies have issues in the process of paying customers. Paying their suppliers, that it takes a long time, or the accounts payable function is always under pressure, and working a lot of overtime to get the work done. It's things like that where lean accounting can apply. Another area which all companies do is the budgeting process, which nobody likes, but everybody does. And it takes a long time. And there's a lot of waste in the process. And so, how can accounting lead the effort to maybe reduce the budgeting process time by 25% or 50%? That's actually, these are some things that I did as a CFO even before we went on the lean journey. Nobody liked the budgeting process, and I didn't like it. It took too long, and so what we changed the way we did things to make it faster, and the managers liked it, and so it's looking. This is where you can make improvements using sort of lean thinking practices, and just identifying waste and eliminating waste. Again, you don't have to be very formal about it, but if you can just understand the difference between a value-added activity and a non-value-added activity, and eliminate the non-value-added activities, you're making progress. And accounting can be a role model for the rest of the organization on how to improve.
This budgeting piece that you were talking about actually made me think of our own approach to strategic planning. So this is a lot like what happens with companies. So many companies plan, they enroll or embark in some type of strategic planning initiative, but most people don't like that, right? So it's inefficient. They put on a lot of time, then they don't follow up, which is really amazing. So you've spent all this time in putting together a plan or in building a budget, and then, as you said earlier, how do you know you're successful? I also believe that there is a very strong lean accounting component there. Once you have your plan, once you have your actions, your own tactics, your goals, and you say, how are we going to be measuring this? And how do we make sure, you used this word several times, how are we going to make sure that this information is relevant, that it's telling us that we get where we want to go, right?
Yeah, and many companies right now are in the middle of their annual planning process. And creating a plan and then a budget for that plan requires a tremendous amount of assumptions. And who is good enough to know, for example, what are business conditions going to be like in 10 or 11 months? Mm-hmm. Nobody's that good. Nobody. And so you create this, and if you use actual to budget reports to sort of assess managers in terms, they don't like that, because I as a manager know that I can't predict the future. So I'm going to pad my assumptions as much as possible so that I look good. And, just think about a year ago, everybody's going through their budgeting process for 2020. And then what happens in February? COVID-19 hits the world. You can't tell me that everyone's budgets were just blown to bits. It doesn't matter. And that's just, that's an extreme example, but that goes on all the time. You don't know if you're going to have an impact on if operations is going to be impacted in May of 2021 for some unknown reason. You don't know if you're going to get a new customer. You just don't know these things. And so, it's better to go to what we call a rolling forecast, where you're looking at these assumptions more frequently and just updating based on the assumptions, rather than here's the budget for the year and it never changes.
Right. So you have a goal, you know where you want to be, but you adapt yourself to the ever-changing environment, which is changing now faster than ever, by the way, right? Every year that passes, things continue to change.
Yeah, and it's funny, you talk about waste. I've worked in companies that they have an annual budget process, then they have a monthly forecasting process, which is...
And neither of them are probably true.
And it's duplicate work. Anyway.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that explanation, Nick. So we're getting close to wrapping up.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would like to recommend to our listeners? So everybody that has followed this last minute, what would you recommend to them?
Well, the first thing to do, if there's any interest in lean accounting, either individually, the accounting and finance team, or the company as a whole, is to learn a little bit on your own. There's my book. There's other good lean accounting books. You can go to the BMA website. There's lots of materials there, and just learn and discuss. What does this mean in our business, or what could it mean in our business? Don't jump into doing anything at the beginning. Just learn, and then, and actually, this is one of the practices in the new book, is, come up with a plan. That's like the first practice. What is your plan? Do you want to focus on the management accounting side? Do you want to focus on, the accounting function? Do you want to focus on both? Set some goals, and then begin the learning process. That's the way I would get started. Sometimes companies can figure this out very quickly and they're ready to move. Other times, and get the right people to understand what lean accounting is and to support it. Okay, you can't just do it on your own. You got to get the right support.
Okay. Well, even the longest journey starts with the first steps. This could be the first step or the first set of small steps for them to start taking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. How can people contact you, Nick? Of course, if they reach out to us at Purpose Lab, we will be very happy to give them your contact details. But do you want to give your social networks, your webpage, email?
Yeah. The website is www.maskell, maskell.com. And my email is nkatko, Katko, @maskell.com. Please, contact me if you have any questions. Again, there's lots of free stuff on the website, and sign up for the mailing list. We have webinars probably once a month. We have recorded webinars that you can, if you register, you can view the recorded webinars. And and just keep learning, you know. And remember, it's about practicing. I always go back to, like, think about something that you do as an individual. Maybe you play a musical instrument, maybe you play a sport, or just think about your education, you know, whatever profession you're in. You learned how to do it, and you started out with the basics, and you had a coach. You know, you had a coach for a sport, you had an instructor for a class, you had a teacher for a musical instrument, and they taught you how to do things. And the more that you practiced, the better that you got. And that's how you approach lean accounting. Don't, you know, it's sort of like, I want to play the guitar, but all I can think of is that I want to, you know, be in front of an audience of 20,000 people giving a concert. Well, it's going to take me a while to get there. You know, I need to learn how to read music. I need to learn how to play the guitar, and I need to learn how to play songs. And the more that I do that, the better I get. Now, maybe I'm not going to play in front of 20,000 people, but maybe I'll play for my family.
Well, and if you want to get better, you definitely need to learn from the best. And
Yep.
you are one of the best on this topic, Nick. For our Spanish-speaking audience, if you also want to contact Nick, and well, if you follow this podcast, you most likely speak English. But if you're also concerned that probably some of the concepts or some of the content will only be in English, please also be sure to reach out to us. We can help you with that. We can work together with Nick to make sure that it also adapts to your Spanish speaking needs.
Yeah, let me just say something about that. Is I have a working agreement with the Lean Six Sigma Institute, and so, you know, they basically use the BMA approach. So again, if it's easier to contact them to talk about lean accounting, please contact them.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. And as you guys know, the Lean Six Sigma Institute certifies all of our work and our trainings also here at Purpose Lab, where we focus on strategy. I think that's it for today, Nick. Thank you very much for being here. You've been great. It's been an honor. And if anything, let's reach out again.
Thanks, Javier. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, you too. Thank you, folks. Back to Spanish. Yo soy Javier Perales de Purpose Lab. Esperamos que todo este contenido en la sesión del podcast del día de hoy haya sido inspirador, haya sido enriquecedor y que te ayude a complementar tu próximo plan. Recuerda que nos encuentras en nuestras redes sociales, en Facebook, en Instagram y en Twitter, purpose-lab.org. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Nick. Take care.
Bye.